Ho, 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 winners, and welcome to Two for the Win with your hosts, Nick and Will, where we share international insight, perspective, and levity on things such as leadership and mindset with Monday Mindset, travel and the travel business with Wanderlust Wednesday, and sports on Fanatic Friday. Please make sure you subscribe, share, and follow Two for the Win. Certainly, please spread the word. And if you have any feedback, ideas for us, please make sure you let us know in the comments or send us an email. And want to obviously thank for today's sponsor, Nick Menard and Associates with Dream Vacations. Happy Monday, Nick.
Ho, ho, ho! Happy Monday, winners!
I know we're in a jolly spirit today, being a couple days before Christmas for those who celebrate, or the holiday season. Always a good time to be jolly and things like that. So, and in the spirit of giving, today's topic is going to be about giving feedback, since a lot of times people are preparing right now for end of year reviews for those who do those sort of things within their organization. So in the spirit of giving, today will be feedback. Any high level thoughts, my Santa elf friend?
I'm this little elf in the room.
Put you on a shelf. That would be interesting.
Elf in the shelf.
Yeah.
Feedback. So we touched on feedback a little bit like a month ago or so. So winners, if you want to get back and listen to other part of our shows, we already touched base a little bit on this one, but now we want to focus on it. And so it's huge. It's super important. If you are not willing to give feedback as a leader or receive feedback as a leader, you are missing out. If you want to progress anything in life, if you want to get better at anything, you will need, to accept feedback, even if it's not the one that you're willing to receive. And you also need, as a leader, to give feedback that is not all about challenges or about things that needs to be better, but also all the great things that your team are doing. So feedback, it goes both ways. That's my first thought when I think about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, in the spirit of continuous improvement, which we've talked a lot about, you need to get that feedback to sanity check, because we all suffer from bias. And it's only natural. Like, we have our worldview, our paradigm, and things like that. And so by getting feedback doesn't mean you have to accept it carte blanche, but it's worth reflecting on it, because at the end of the day, perception is reality. And if somebody's giving you feedback, again, from their point of view, that's how they're viewing things. So whether you agree with it or not, it gives you an opportunity to understand where things stand with that person, one way or the other, and you can decide what to do with it.
100%.
There we go. So shall we start with our one of our more favorite segments, the quotes and quips? Let me go ahead and pull out the first quote. This quote is from Frank A. Clark, and it is: criticism, like rain, should be gentle enough to nourish someone's growth without destroying the roots. Thoughts on the quote?
Yeah, so the quote here is about feedback, but also the delivery of the feedback. I think it's extremely important to understand that the way you are sharing the feedback will have a huge impact on the person receiving it, how they're going to act on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something we need to always be very cautious when we give the feedback, that the person receiving hand doesn't really know what to expect, probably. We know the expectation because we read the feedback or we have a feedback to share, but the receiving hand, that may come totally out of the blue. So it's very important to take a step back, reflect, and see how, based on the person you give the feedback to, how that person will be able to receive it the best, and how are they going to implement them. Mm-hmm. So the delivery, it's huge.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing, I agree with that take for sure. And the other thing I was thinking of when I heard that quote was, sometimes people can get a little carried away with providing too much volume of feedback. So say, for example, somebody did a lot of good things. That's always good to highlight. But when it comes on the constructive aspects, what I've found is if you narrow it to just a few items, the critical few, like I like to say, it's more actionable for somebody than if you give them say
Mm.
15 things that they're doing great, and then you give them 7 things that are areas to improve. I suppose you could structure it in a way where they could act upon it throughout the year, but that seems to be a lot to digest. And you'd probably be better off narrowing that list to 3 or less.
Absolutely. I always said, who more you share, who less you get as an actionable item.
Hmm.
If you limit to one or two or even three, but one or two is my sweet spot personally,
Hmm.
then you can check how the feedback has been applied.
Hmm.
If you do too much, how are you gonna check? You're
Yeah.
gonna feel like that person has no intention to improve, and maybe they picked one or two that they feel is the best for them to act on. But we always have a prioritization list on the
Hmm.
feedback. So you want to start what is the most important for your business, for your unit, for your team to act on today,
Hmm.
and then you fix that one, you celebrate,
Hmm.
and then you move on to the next one during the next session you have with that person.
Yeah.
So that's to me what I like to do.
Yeah. 100%. I love the fact that you built in the celebration. It's like most things in life, if you want to see continued good behavior, make sure you're praising and celebrating when you observe the good behavior. So, all
Mm-hmm.
good. All right, the quip. So, again, the quip is something with a little levity to it. This one is anonymous. So, unfortunately, there is not somebody I could give the credit to. Otherwise, I would. But the quip is giving feedback is like seasoning food too little and it's too bland, too much and it's inedible.
We literally just talk about it.
We did. We
And
did.
again, for winners, you all know Will now, so he loves to talk about cookies, about food, about seasoning. So yeah, I can hear his belly already start making noise, but just reading the quip.
That's
But
because that's the eggnog.
oh my god, I'm gonna start with eggnog. But yeah, no. So again, we are totally in agreement there, and we just spoke about it.
Yeah.
Like little dose. I know sometimes as a leader, you are listening to an interaction. If you have a sales team and you listen to a sales speech, or if you're in service, you listen to a service call,
Hmm.
or partnered, or anything like that. And then you feel like, oh my God, definitely with someone newer, you feel like, oh my God, she or he could have done this. And you're probably right. But again, what is the number one thing on the prioritization list that needs to be applied immediately in order to make a greater impact for the outcome that you wish to have?
Hmm.
Then, congratulations. Then you go to number two, and that's literally what it is. In the service department that I'm on for a few years now, it's very important to understand that okay, the next call scheduled, it's always number one on my list. If that is not done, if you didn't capture or secure the next call, that's a problem
Uh-oh.
Hmm.
because that should be the number one feedback. It's one bullet point, super short, straight to the point, and you can check at during the next call if they actually applied it or yes or not.
Hmm.
So it's number one. Then number two, I like to look at did they have a value conversation?
Hmm.
Like did they have like a conversation based on what they gave to the person a month ago. Are they acting on those things that the clients? And if they do, great. Did you ask if it was valuable?
Right.
Because maybe it's not valuable and we need to know that.
Yep.
So that's something number two. Then I go to number three, like number four. And it's really what makes a difference between building someone up to where they need to be and want to be in order to be top performer, in order to go for the greater good,
Hmm.
or someone who is stagnant because oh my god, I receive a list of 17 points to act on, and I act on the little detail that comes on the last position first, and it's not
Hmm.
going to be really improving anything as of today. So
Yeah.
very important, again, repetitive, but it's important to know.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think consistency, basically. Yeah, it's being consistent, being clear with expectations. And I'll be honest, one of the things that I um, got better at as I continued in my career is moving away from feedback being an event to being
Mm.
something that's ongoing. Because, like, some organizations in the past, you get mid-year feedback, end of year feedback, and it was like formal. And that might be the only time I ever got feedback during the year from that organization versus like the organization we're with now. Feedback is ongoing. Like, you don't have to wait for an event to share the feedback, give the feedback as you go, both positive and constructive, so that when you get to end of year reviews, if you have whoever you're giving your end of year review to, if they're surprised by the feedback, that's actually feedback for you that you probably should have made your feedback either more regular or more clear. So sometimes we know some leaders, especially in the customer success world, because typically people go into client success because they're amiable, they like people, and then they progress into leadership. And again, leadership, people usually go into leadership because they like people. But the aspect of leadership is you have to be able to have managerial courage and have direct conversations. And sometimes people can't make that transition. And so they may be like, oh, you're doing good, or oh, I know you're trying hard, and blah, 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 blah. And then they get to the end of the year and like, oh, you didn't quite meet expectations. And the employee's like, what? Like, where did this come from? And it's because they were skirting the issue. So give the feedback, be fair, clear, and consistent, like Nick was saying, but do that throughout the year. And the end of year review then should be more of a executive summary, if you will, on the year and what to focus on going forward versus a surprise.
Yeah, I love that. As a rule of thumb, if the mid-year review, definitely the end of year review is a surprise, that's a bad leadership and probably some managerial stuff that's happening there. So hard conversations, um, they are there for a reason. They are not there to put people down. They are there to actually help your associates, your leader, your manager, whatever, wherever you are in the organization. So having the managerial courage, like Will mentioned, is for the greater good of the person, of your team, your region, your department, the company. So those, even though for some people it may come as a, oh my God, I need to prepare. I will probably not sleep the night before I give that thing. And I heard that before. It's not even, so it's for the greater good, because if you don't do it, the outcome will be a lot worse than if you actually do it now. And I love the fact that you mentioned that we don't need to wait those time, because we know during the year when you work for any kind of business organization, you hear from peers, from partners, from from sales. You hear from service, from someone about what they feel about a person. Well, share it. Positive, challenging, constructive. Share it and see how you can impact it. So when the end of year comes, you will have more feedback, and they can say, "Hey, thank you for acting on XYZ with that person, because I see a progress already." If you wait at the end of year, then the feedback will be a lot less positive, and you need to start at that moment with the feedback received. So you're losing traction, you're losing the opportunity to advance faster with your organization, your team, and your people. So take it as an action, and have some courage to do that. And once you start doing it, it become natural, and you will not have that fear, because it's actually something you want to implement, and you want to receive it. You need, on the other side, you need to be having the same mindset. I want to be receiving feedback from my leader. I want my leader to tell me when something is challenging or is constructive or positive, because then I know if I can continue doing what I'm doing, or if I need to pivot.
Right.
Which is fine. I mean, we all have to do it.
Sure. Yeah. No, totally agree. And I really like that. And I think, when it comes to what the way I would summarize what you shared, which is spot on, is you have to embrace the spirit of which the feedback is being given. And if you're truly being a human leader, an empathetic leader, you would actually be doing your teammates a disservice by withholding feedback, because you're delaying the opportunity, like what you're saying, for them to improve. And instead, if you just make sure you're giving the ongoing regular feedback, critical few, you're giving people the chance to improve, like what you're saying. You can get feedback and then they can follow up on it and then say, oh yeah, now they can see the growth of that person in that area, which is very helpful. But going back to the spirit of the intent, if you're viewing feedback as punitive, yes, you will stress out about it. Yes, you may have anxiety about it. yes, you may be uncomfortable delivering it, especially if you haven't been clear and consistent throughout the year and giving feedback. Yeah, because now you have this like event that's built up. And if it's going to be less than positive feedback overall given, yeah, you probably do have a lot of anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the
Mm-hmm.
person's going to be probably taking it out of the blue and sometimes have an emotional reaction. That makes the situation even more emotional than what it should be. Versus if you think of it with the spirit of the intent, there's as a leader, you have a fiduciary duty. You have a fiduciary duty to the organization that you're with or the business that you're building, number one. Number two, you have a fiduciary duty to your team. Because as a leader, it's not about a check the box exercise. It's about how do you augment someone's talent to highlight a path for them to make use of that talent to their highest and best use. Notice I didn't say that you help make people maximize their talent. You can't do that. That's up to the individual. But you can illuminate the path, and then it's up to that individual to walk the path. But if you have the spirit of I am trying to help this person, I would be doing them a disservice if I wasn't giving them clear and honest feedback. I'm not saying it makes it easy to have those conversations, but it does make it easier. And if you've built up that trust with the rapport with your teammates, then they know when they hear feedback like that that it's coming from a good place. That you're really just trying to do it to make them better and to make sure that they're delivering on the role responsibilities for the organization that they set up.
No, I love that. You said it everything properly, like perfectly good English, like better than I do. So thank you so much for putting all that together and explaining the why and the how. That's very important. On that point, I mean, based on what you mentioned, I have two questions for you. So I
Okay.
will challenge you there because it was not planned.
Yeah, it's all good.
The first one is you mentioned when someone you may have emotions, like someone will get emotional because of some feedback receiving. Do you have an example of a time that yourself received feedback that you may not have? I'm not talking about emotion on that aspect for you, but
Hmm.
that you may have received feedback that you may not at the time of receiving the feedback totally in agreement with, which we
Hmm.
are human, like
Hmm.
we are not robots. How can you tell our winners a best practice or how to handle a negative feedback or feedback with constructive but maybe a little bit against what you think
Hmm.
should have been given, and the best reaction to have against another leader to absorb that feedback and act on it?
I will share that by being vulnerable about telling you a time I really messed up in that
Oh.
situation. So you could almost do the opposite of this, and that would probably be a better thing. So when I was very early in my tenure with the organization I am with now, I was in a client facing role when I first started. So I'd take a step back and do that sort of thing. And I'm glad I did. Um, we have a model where we partner with another person to deliver value to the client. So it's a shared service delivery model. And this person was more tenured than me, had more expertise in this particular field. And I had sent out a follow up email to the client with some recommendations. And I think I was like 4 or 5 months in the role. And a couple of the recommendations missed the mark. But this person asked me just to send out the follow up directly to the client, and they didn't review it, and it went out, and I literally stayed up late to send it out because I was going on vacation the next day. So I'm on vacation. We're driving somewhere. I forget where we end up going, and I see this email, and this person we're supposed to be partners, right? Copied my leader, copied my boss's boss, copied his boss, and a few other people I don't remember, and blasted me
Mm.
saying this was inaccurate. It didn't make sense. It didn't hit the mark. It makes us look bad to the client, yada, yada, yada. And I was fuming. I pulled over on the side of the road And I told my family, I'm going to need like 15 minutes. And I'm penning an email and I'm hot. And I'm like, for one, if you ever have criticism, tell me individually. Don't blast the entire group so we make it out. And I, in the spirit of the holidays, and for those who may know Seinfeld, this was the airing of grievances on my side. So then I responded like in the Festivus for the rest of us, and I blasted him back on everybody. I just was hot.
And you copied everyone?
Oh yeah,
It's a
yeah.
reply
Oh
all.
yeah. And I'm like, oh no, you don't, because I will say, generally speaking, not when I was younger as much, but as I seasoned, I've definitely become more open to feedback because I really have bought into the spirit of continuous improvement. But that being said, don't the delivery 100%. So what ended up happening is my boss at the time, she was just a sweetheart, and she handled everything and addressed it and got it all done. And then when I came back, she's like, "Go enjoy your vacation. I will handle this from here on out." And then when I came back, we had a chat, and it was a constructive conversation. So she had my back 100%, which I will forever be grateful for. But then she's like, "Okay, instead of responding emotionally like you did, you could have took a couple different approaches." And we discussed it. One would be, "Thank you for sharing the feedback. Yeah, it did not hit the mark. How can we do things differently going forward?" Or pull them in one-on-one before we reply all and have that conversation and then follow up. So there was a lot of different things differently I could have done than what I did. But at the end of the day, um, we're human,
Mm.
and it's just one of those things. So I guess to summarize based on your question, if you get feedback you don't agree with, or maybe is even inflammatory to you, take a breath, pause, think about what is the right type of audience and communication mechanism. Because email, you can't tell voice inflection, you can't see body language. So it's really tough if you're going to have critical feedback shared back and forth to do it with email, because it's tougher for people to understand context and voice inflection and things like that. So I would have it live. Think about, does it need to be one-on-one or maybe a small group, depending on the situation, but try to take the emotion out of it. And I'll share one last real quick true story about Abraham Lincoln that resonated with me. And I read it after that situation. I wish I had read about it before that situation, but I was reading this biography about Abraham Lincoln. And there was this general back in the Civil War, not Grant, but a general before Grant. I don't remember. And it was right after the Battle of Gettysburg, I think it was, which was obviously one of the more bloodier battles in Civil War history. And the obviously the Union had just won that battle, and they had the South, the Confederacy, on their heels, and they had them trapped kind of in this little section with the river and the field. And Lincoln is penning letters to the generals saying, "Seize the moment. We can end this war. We can end it if you just capture them." If you all he had to do was cross, and basically based on the numbers and the situation, they could have ended the war right there. The general completely refused to act on it. And actually what happened is the war lasted another couple years. So a lot more lives were lost. And Lincoln wrote a scathing letter, like dressing down the general, saying, "Do you know you've now inevitably prolonged this war, and how many countless lives will be lost now because you failed to act?" And Lincoln, for those who study history, was very stoic. He was very level and calm. So for him to write a letter, early in his career, he wasn't. He was hot like that. When he was an attorney, he used to write stuff like that. And actually, he wrote such a scathing letter to somebody in the newspaper, and he published it publicly. The person challenged him to a duel, and he could have lost his life. And he took that learning from that to be like, I am never publicly bashing somebody like that in public again and never going to write a terse letter. But in this moment, he did. But do you know how they found out about that letter? When he was assassinated, they found that letter in a drawer. He never, after the war, he never mailed it. So he vented it all out, wrote it all out. He remembered, I'm sure, about that experience where somebody challenged him to a duel because of how it was, and he never sent it. And I think so that would be the lesson. Let calmer heads prevail. Find your medium to purge off if you have a lot of emotion, but do that in a private way, in a healthy way, and then get back to having the conversation in a level, logical manner.
I love it. I love stories because stories tell the whole story, of course, and it allows our winners to really understand, like the power of giving feedback and the difference between giving like the delivery of the feedback and and another way to give feedback. So I think it's very, very powerful. And now the second question I had, you pretty much mentioned it already, which is pretty good. I was gonna ask for winners, what would you recommend? When would you recommend to send feedback in writing, so by email, or a group feedback instead of individual feedback? Live feedback, because you mentioned that it's important. I totally agree. It's important to give continuous feedback and not wait certain time to give it. So we are totally in agreement there. But sometimes, and you mentioned that during what you just mentioned about Abraham Lincoln, that it was in writing and it's hard to tell. So yeah, I was gonna ask you if you have any idea or advice to give our winners about when to give feedback in writing and when to give feedback live.
Yeah, I think in general, don't take this as gospel, but in general, if you have positive feedback, fine to do it in writing, right? Like I get copied on things sometimes where somebody does something really great and their leader copies me on it and I piggyback and say, great job, love. And I try to be specific. Like I pick out something from the feedback that was given to say, hey, this is what kind of resonated with me when I heard this. So it's not just like, good job, and that's it. But I think if it's positive, you can certainly do that anytime because they'll be able to tell it's positive by the tone of that. If it's constructive, my recommendation is, in general, have the conversation first and then recap the conversation with email with the constructive feedback. So like if I was underperforming and you came to me and I was reporting to you and you said, hey, what's going on? Tell me a little bit about this and that, blah, blah, blah. Well, right now you're not meeting expectations on this, blah, 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 blah. But we've had a dialogue, it's been back and forth. And then you can recap that conversation. So, hey, based on our conversation, Will, this was my, how I would summarize the conversation, copying you to make sure you have a similar kind of summary on it. So then it's fine. But if you're just if the first time you're going to communicate constructive feedback to somebody is written, I think the context is going to be really important. So if it's more about, hey, this was really good, think about doing something like this to make it better, that's fine, written, right? Because it's not really uber critical. It's more like a suggestive idea.
Coaching.
Coaching. If it was hey, based on how you did X, you are not meeting expectations and blah, blah. Don't do that in writing first. Like that's just not going to resonate with most people. But I will say the caveat to that is when you first start working with somebody, you should ask them how they want to receive feedback. So if somebody came to me and said, and I asked them and I said, okay, so how do you like to receive feedback? And how do you want me to know, if things are going off track, how do you want me to communicate that to you? And they said, oh, just send me an email. I would do that. I've never had somebody say that, but if they did, I would do.
Awesome. Well, that was very, very, very good. I feel like that the last part about the experience, the stories, and the Abraham Lincoln story that you figured out.
WWLD. What would Lincoln do?
I know. Be vulnerable for winners. That's pretty awesome. And again, we all go through up and downs. We all have learning curves, and pretty awesome that you were able to share that with our audience.
Oh,
so thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And thanks to our winners. And again, in the spirit of giving, remember, feedback is a gift. It may not feel like it sometimes, depending on the tone of the feedback. But again, if you adopt that growth mindset, if you have the spirit of continuous improvement, whether or not you agree with the feedback, it's perception. You can decide what to do with it, and we can all continue to tweak things because we're on the spirit of continuous improvement. So that is our gift to you on this Monday Mindset before the Christmas holiday. Certainly hope you and your family, friends, and loved ones enjoy this holiday season. Please make sure you subscribe, share, and follow for Two for the Win podcast. We're so grateful for all of you, our winners, and certainly thanks to Nick Menard and Associates from Dream Vacations for sponsoring this. And again, maybe you got a little holiday sizzle sazzle you want to get in for next year. Give them a call and make that dream vacation a reality. Any last thoughts, Nick?
No, thank you, winners, and I wish you all the best. Enjoy time with your family and friends.
Take care. Happy holidays. Ho, ho, ho.
Bye.
Bye.